Thank you. That was a composition I wrote entitled Cycling. So, I'm a jazz musician. I come from a Chinese-American family. My father left China in 1984 to further his studies in France, and my mother followed a couple of years later. They both eventually decided to stay abroad to ensure a better future for their children. Unfortunately for them, I grew up to become a jazz musician. That was their reaction until they realized I was serious. Over the years, I've often struggled with my identity as a Chinese-American jazz musician. I mean, jazz at heart is an African-American art form, and its history is populated with a cast of incredibly strong human beings. They created a music that celebrated freedom and individuality in the face of racism and oppression. Nowadays, jazz is much more difficult to define. It has become a global art form, cross-pollinating with other musical genres, of course. We jazz musicians come from a wide variety of cultural backgrounds, and we study the music in colleges and universities. We're taught to be aware of the history of our music, yet we often struggle to see ourselves as part of any kind of historical continuum. In light of this, I've often wondered what gives me the right to even call myself a jazz musician, and certainly what I have in common with the greatest practitioners of the art. I'm beginning to realize, though, that all of us, no matter our background, have a connection to jazz, because at the core of jazz is this concept of improvisation. Now, in a musical context, improvisation refers to the spontaneous creation of music, usually based upon a pre-existing structure. In simpler terms, improvisation is just a series of choices. That's all it is. It's a series of reactions to circumstances both expected and unexpected. And in this way, we all practice improvisation in our daily lives, right? I mean, we improvise when we make a wrong turn on the highway. We improvise when we're having a dinner party and someone calls to say that their parents are in town and they want to come along with, 3 more guests or whatever. We improvise when our boss throws us an additional task to do at work that we didn't expect. So we're always improvising all the time. It's impossible to plan out our every move. We rely on improvisation to get through the day. Now, the greatest jazz musicians in their improvisation go beyond mere creation. This is what makes them great. They demonstrate an incredible integrity, commitment to their own personal values and beliefs, while simultaneously listening to, respecting, and accommodating the voices of the other musicians. This creates an environment inside each group where every musician is given the space to become the best versions of themselves. And this is an incredible environment to be a part of. This is like what we all strive for in our daily lives. This is what we all want. This is what jazz musicians represent for our own lives. This is freedom, really. I mean, this is what we think of as the American experience. Improvisation was central to my parents' experience as immigrants. Their original intent was to stay in China return to China after my father finished his studies. However, in 1989, the Tiananmen Square massacre happened in Beijing, which is where my family is from. Hundreds of students were killed demonstrating for greater political freedom and accountability. This event precipitated a series of improvisational choices for my parents. They decided not to return to China. My father found an opportunity in Canada instead, and this eventually led us to Horseheads, New York, where I was raised. Go Raiders. Throughout my childhood, I've watched my parents improvising around their newly adopted country. I've watched them observe their unfamiliar new surroundings and make adjustments based on the need to understand and work with these new surroundings. More impressively, I have watched as they've maintained a strong connection to their Chinese values and culture while simultaneously thriving in a completely different cultural milieu. On the one hand, they spoke Chinese in the house, and they cooked Chinese food, watched Chinese television. On the other hand, they somewhat bemusedly shuttled their children off to cross-country practice and school plays and homecoming dances, and of course, jazz band. My mother was unable to use her teaching degree in the United States, so she went back to school and eventually started working for the town of Horseheads. My father, after several years of hard work, rose to the top of his field in fiber optics research. In other words, they both demonstrated what the greatest jazz musicians demonstrate in their improvising. They had the integrity to maintain their Chinese values within this American cultural framework, while at the same time, they listened to, accommodated, and succeeded within this framework. Now, through my parents, I've absorbed and assimilated these things. In my improvising, I strive not only to improvise, but I strive to make my playing reflect my personality, my likes and my dislikes. At the same time, every day I strive to become a better listener. I strive to listen better to the history of the music, to the musicians that came before me, to the musicians I play with, to the instrument itself. And in this way, I hope to inch ever so slightly closer to discovering my place within this incredible framework that jazz has left for all of us. Now, jazz and embracing improvisation is essentially embracing all of our rights to self-expression while making the best use of whatever materials are at hand. We all exhibit this process in our daily life, and we're all products of this process through our personal and family histories. So in our own way, we're all jazz musicians. Thank you very much. Oh. The last tune I'm going to play is a standard entitled I'll Be Seeing You, and I'm going to play the melody first because it's a tune that maybe some people know because it's a tune that a lot of people have played over the years. Then I'm going to start playing it the way that I like to play it, sort of just to demonstrate what I've just been talking about. So, thank you. Sounds like this. Thank you very much.